No matter what line of work you're in, there's always someone in the office or out in the field who does the heavy lifting. Our guest today, Katie Achille, most certainly does a lot of heavy lifting in the office as she is managing partner at the Devon Group, a public relations company. But outside the office, the heavy lifting continues. You see, Katie is a competitive power lifter for Team USA. Yes, that Team USA. She describes what she does as lifting heavy things and putting them down. And we're going to learn all about this as Katie Achille joins us on the Talent Show next. We are back on the Talent Show. My name's Tom Alexander. My guest is Katie Achille. Katie, welcome.
Hello, Tom. Thank you for having me today.
It is just great to have you on the show. This is really fascinating to me, and I gotta say, a talent we have not seen before on the show. Certainly something a little unusual. Maybe folks aren't accustomed to seeing someone who's a managing editor by day, managing partner, I should say, and power lifter by night or weekend or whenever it happens. Let's get right to it. How did you become interested in powerlifting?
Sure. So I often joke that I've always been a bit of a jock throughout my life. I've tried many sports. Typically always been fairly mediocre at most of them. Uh, as an adult, I tried to find a hobby, as many of us do. And throughout my travels, I was training at a gym, and I met a woman there who at the time was, she was actually an engineer and she had decided to change careers. And she decided that she was going to go from being an engineer to become a powerlifting coach. And she wanted to become a trainer. And, we had worked out together at that point for a few years. And, I think maybe it was her engineer's mind. She looked at me and she said, I think you're someone who would be a good power lifter. And would you be willing to give it a shot?
Yeah.
And, I'm someone who's always up for a challenge. So I said, sure, I will be, kind of your guinea pig. So I was essentially her client zero, not to be confused with patient zero.
Right.
And so I gave it a shot with her. I was essentially, she started programming me and I got on board with the intention of training to do one meet. I figured, I'll train for 6 months. I'll compete once and maybe that'll be it. At that point in my life, I had done, a 5K, I had tried a sprint triathlon, I had tried a few various other competitive sports. But so I went into this with just the idea that I was going to try it once. And here we are. That's six years ago.
Wow. So it stuck. It took.
This one took, yeah. And that was my first competition was November 2019. So as we know, that was a very interesting time to get started with a new hobby, especially one that requires, being around other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was right on the eve of some a big change on the planet.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
hmm
I'm guessing it had to be somewhat intimidating at the beginning.
Very much so. I think powerlifting and lifting in general, there's a little bit of a stigma, I think, attached to it, especially for women. These are typically seen, I think, as male-dominated sports historically. I think in gyms, those rooms can be very scary to go into for the first time, especially if you don't necessarily know what you're doing. If you don't have programming, if you don't have a coach by your side or someone to show you the ropes. Um, so yeah, it's been an interesting field to try to crack into. And it's a sport that's actually grown tremendously. For all types of athletes in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm assuming that, like with everything, start off slow, baby steps to some degree, and then grow. So the weight initially was a lot lighter than what you're
Hmm.
lifting these days.
Hmm.
And uh, if you can, just take us through that a little bit. Like when you first started, what kind of weight were you lifting?
So my very first competition, like I said, it was November of 2019. It was a very big meet too. One of the bigger ones that I've competed at. And it was funny, there was another girl there that I knew who we were competing same age and weight class, and she turned to me right before I went to do my first attempt, and she said she was nervous. And she said she's like, how does it feel knowing that we're gonna be last, like we're gonna place last? And I remember being like, are you trying to get in my head? Like what? So it's a very mental sport. There's always going to be someone who can lift more than you. There's always going to be someone whose technique is better. There's a lot of rules that you have to think about when you're up on the platform. It's a lot of nervous system conditioning. But yeah, you start off with what your body can handle and you start to work your way up. It's a sport that I think you really need a coach. There are obviously apps and websites where you can even go to ChatGPT and have it program you. But I think it's really valuable to have someone on your side essentially to help you grow safely, and really start to move your way up. But I mean, where I started, I was looking. There's a database where you can see kind of your numbers and from competition. You know, it's gone up substantially. And you don't always see that in your day to day, like when you're in the gym and training, you don't necessarily see how much you've grown as an athlete. You have to go back and look at it. The numbers you don't always see the shift.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was just going to ask you, when you realized, uh, this was something that you could compete at such a high level. I mean, there was, I guess, maybe that moment where it's like, you never say, I mean, anybody that does anything, an athlete or an artist, a musician, whatever, they say, well, I've arrived. You've never really arrived. It's a evolution, right?
Mhm.
But when did you kind of get to the point where it's like, wow, I'm competing on a pretty darn high level here. Do you remember that moment?
Um, I think so. My first two meets, I think again, your coach helps you determine kind of your attempts. And, there are different schools of thought in terms of what you should do when you're on the platform.
Right.
Some people think you should go for broke and, put it all out there, but that's a risky way of playing the game. You could potentially miss your attempts. You, might not get to the podium that way. There are other people who think you should play it safe and just try to get as many, make all your attempts, and maybe you don't go for broke though. Maybe you leave some in reserve, so you don't really know what your maxes are then. Uh, so again, there's different ways of thinking about it. But for me, I think it was might have been. I think the turning point for me was thinking I had a really bad meet. It was my third meet where I didn't let myself prepare. I kind of winged it. I went out too much kind of the week of. I was like eating, my diet wasn't dialed in. I wasn't drinking enough water. Um, I missed a bunch of attempts. I let the announcer get in my head. I stormed off, and it was the pivotal moment of, am I going to invest in this? Am I going to make this something I really want to go for? Or am I like, why am I wasting my time? So it wasn't really about like, am I really able to compete? Is it, do I really want to do this? Like, because I think if you're willing to put in the time, if you're willing to put in the effort, you can grow into something. you might not be the best. Like I don't think, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm going to get an invitation to Worlds. I might never be that level of elite. In terms of the powerlifting community, there are definitely some people out there I will never be able to touch, and that's fine for where I am in my journey. But I know that if I continue to get in the gym, I continue to, again, dial in my nutrition, make sure I'm, hydrated and doing controlling all the things I can control, that I will continue to grow as an athlete. So that's the way I think about it. Um, but again, that was a decision I had to make. I had to really like, do some soul searching after that bad day.
Yeah, it's interesting how a moment in time can sort of help. It's like a road marker, you know.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, this time here, this was a change, a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, just at the top of my head, um, you know, Jalen Hurts, who's the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, my team for my
Yep.
whole life, still has on his wallpaper on his phone when he lost the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and he
Yep.
still kind of uses that as motivation, even though he won this year. Plenty of people asked him, "You're going to change that picture now to you walking through the confetti coming down from the stands?" No, I'm not, because it grounds me. It keeps me.
Hmm.
And so that's a very interesting thing how folks will use a certain moment in time as a real truly defining moment. So that's
Yeah.
fascinating. Our guest is Katie Achille, from the Devon Group, a public relations company, and of course she is part of Team USA Powerlifting, and just fascinating stuff. Before we go to the break, Katie, I want to ask you this.
Hmm.
Explain to the layperson, just give a little one, including myself, how the scoring works. Is it form? Is it just achieving a certain level of lift and then you're done? And how does that work exactly?
So you get 3 attempts for each event, essentially. So that's squat, bench, and deadlift. And you're scored based on the number of attempts that you make.
I see.
And then it gets more complicated. So I don't want to take up too much time. There's lots of rules for each event, and 3 judges, and I could be here all day explaining the rules, but
That's the Cliff
that's the
Notes.
basics of it.
That's
Yeah.
the Cliff Notes version,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. That's great. And we want to learn a whole lot more, and we're going to do that on the other side of this break. You're watching and listening to The Talent Show. My name's Tom Alexander. My guest, Katie Achille. Back in just a moment. Stay tuned. We are back on The Talent Show along with Katie Achille. My name's Tom Alexander. And Katie, I got to ask you, it seems that everyone who's been on the show does something important outside of their work and more than just a hobby. It truly defines much of who they are. And I'm assuming this is the case with you.
Yeah, at this point, it is it's definitely become more of a hobby. Powerlifting takes up a lot of my time. I have my workouts that I have to get in throughout the week. A lot of my diet is based around, you know, my training, my travel. If I'm, traveling for a meet, nationals this year is in Reno, Nevada at the end of May. I've mentioned Worlds before. That is an invitational event. There's also Bench Worlds. There's various different um, competitions based on,
Right.
event specific as well as age specific, group specific. They're happening all year long, and you can compete in different states, countries, the like. So
Yeah.
uh, it's really, kind of all encompassing if you start to compete at the higher levels. So
Do folks from Team USA, are they occasionally selected or invited to Olympic trials?
so powerlifting is actually not part of the Olympics. That's it's interesting, and it doesn't look like powerlifting will ever be an Olympic sport.
Huh.
So the Olympics has Olympic lifting, which is where people, do the overhead
Right.
with the barbell.
Yeah. That's
There's
where I guess I confused it.
Yeah,
I,
no, it's a common misconception. So powerlifting is squat, bench, and deadlift. Those are the three. And then Olympic powerlifting is different lifts. There's been some back and forth um, between the various powers that be throughout the years at the higher level, the IOC and the IPF and all these acronyms. Um, I don't totally understand the nuance of why powerlifting will never be an Olympic sport. I think some of it has to do with um, drug use and things like that back in like the 80s when steroids were big. I can tell you like the federations that I lift in or have lifted in, I've lifted in two in my career so far, USAPL, and now I'm part of Powerlifting America. Those are both tested federations.
yep.
So absolutely no drug use whatsoever. Abides by WADA standards, which is the same standards that Olympians are held to.
Mhm.
But again, as of right now, powerlifting is not an Olympic sport. So our Team USA is a different Team USA, but we do compete at world and regional and obviously national competitions. So last year I did go to NAPF, which is a regional competition, which was 13 countries. It was held in the US, but there was Canada, Team USA, and then various countries from the Caribbean and Latin America and some other locations. So that was pretty cool to be a part of.
Yeah, yeah, sure sounds it. Shift gears just a little bit. I mean,
Mhm.
has the competitive aspect of powerlifting help you or inform the work you do in the office?
Again, it's because powerlifting is so mental, which I think, a lot of people don't necessarily associate a sport that's so um, tied to muscle. I think
Yeah.
people don't necessarily draw the parallel between like the mind muscle connection. For me, it has because again, there's this intense focus and this intense drive and nervous system conditioning that's part of powerlifting. So for me, it has because I really have to. Um, I use some of the same techniques that I apply in the gym in the office now.
Yeah, that's interesting to me because a lot of folks that we have had on the show have said that we just recently had Phil Morris on, the actor
Mhm.
Phil Morris, who was Jackie Giles on Seinfeld, and he is in the martial arts, and he said how the martial arts has, and he's been in it almost his entire life, even since a child, and said how much it helped him with concentration and focus on what he does as an actor. And
Mhm.
so it makes complete sense. You're working with people every day, public relations, relationships, those kinds of things. And I would imagine, yeah, the focus that you need translates well to that world.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot about timing. You have to decide, attempt, like you really have to weigh options. You
Mhm.
have to think about, when is the right time for me to do this. You have to think about also complementary muscles, accessories that will help you build strength in other areas. So again, it's sort of the same principles that you would apply to building a campaign for a customer. If they want to develop awareness in, say, a market that's not their usual area of focus, it might be the same technique that you would, apply to building a lift that, maybe isn't your strongest.
Right,
So.
right. Are there goals that you continue to strive for today?
Absolutely. I've recently entered the Masters One category, which basically just means I've gotten older. So it's a different field that I'm in now. Powerlifting is there are obviously different categories based on your age, also your weight class. So right now, my weight class has also just gotten a lot more competitive. Um, which means the field is just getting tighter. So I have, my coach and I met at the beginning of this year to decide what my goals should look like for this year, what's feasible based off of and it's interesting, my current coach is also has an engineering background. So not the same person who got me into powerlifting,
Yeah.
but interesting connection. Seems to be a tie-in with powerlifting. So this engineering mindset about how you can build strength. So I talked to him
Bit of a
and,
science, right? It is kind of a,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. There's a lot of data involved too. I am not necessarily a data-driven person. Again, PR, I come much more from a communication, more creative and artistic mindset than necessarily data. But I met with my coach and, he kind of showed me, the way he tracks my progress and gave me what he thinks is feasible. And then I gave him what I want to be achieving. And we sort of decided what's going to be possible, and set some goals based around that.
Mhm.
And then I also looked at what I've done in the last year, plus, and, I looked at the numbers. Again, I went to the database that exists and kind of looked at, what I did, what I didn't do. And, I also realized like, hey, I competed too much in the last year. I realized that I had done 4 separate competitions. At the higher levels, the truly elite powerlifters, they only compete once, maybe twice a year.
Hmm.
I competed 4 times. That's a lot. That basically means you're almost always in a training cycle.
Yeah.
So I've decided, I'm gonna kind of refocus this year and maybe compete less and instead spend more time in the gym. So, the interesting thing is with powerlifting, most of the work is done for me at home because my gym is in my garage. I'm only on the platform. If I only compete once or twice this year, I'm only on the platform for a number of minutes,
Right. Right.
but I've spent hours getting there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We're talking with Katie Achille from the Devon Group and also Team USA and powerlifting. Let's take a look at you in action here. Let's go to this clip for a second. Wow. Okay. So we saw what you do there. Take us through a little bit of that if you wouldn't mind. Just like, you got the bench, you got the gear on and everything. Like, in terms of actually going in to go to do a lift like that. Um, what's the prep? What's the pregame, if you will?
so for so bench is interesting because it has the most number of commands of all the lifts. So with bench, you have 3 commands. You have to wait for the head referee to tell you to start. You have to wait for the head referee to tell you to press, and you have to wait for the head referee or judge to tell you to rack. So you're hanging out on that bench, and again, you're in your singlet and your whole little outfit, which again, all of that gear has to be approved before you can even get out there for the day. Um, so when you get called to go out, you have 1 minute to start your lift.
Mhm.
So you get out there, there are, the spotters who are helping you. You can ask them to help you unrack the bar if you want. That's an option. Not everybody does it. Um, Once you've unracked, that's when you wait for the start. Once you have it at your chest and the bar is deemed motionless, is when you'll get the press. And once the bar is deemed motionless at the top, is when you'll get the rack.
Yeah.
So again, it looks like it's happening quickly, but when you're actually up on the bench and you're waiting for all of those calls, it feels like hours are passing. Because again, that weight is not light necessarily. And yeah, that's what's happening, kind of as the calls are unfolding up on the platform.
What's the top weight you've done?
top weight on bench that I've done in competition at this point, I believe is around 165 pounds. Powerlifting is done in kilos, so that's part of it is I always have to, convert in my head
Yeah,
between kilos and pounds.
metric system conversion.
Yeah, yeah. So again, not the most data driven person, but math.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Still, that's astounding.
yeah, yeah.
We want to wrap things up with Katie Achille right here on the Talent Show, and we'll do that on the other side of this break. My name's Tom Alexander, and we'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Wrapping things up now on the Talent Show. My guest is Katie Achille from the Devon Group and Team USA power lifter, competitive power lifter, which is just a fascinating. I'm going to say a lot more than a hobby, although she describes it as a hobby. I think it feels like, to me at least, a true commitment and lifestyle almost. If you were going to say to a young woman who might be considering getting into powerlifting, first of all, what would you tell them? What would be the do's and don'ts?
Do's and don'ts. I would say, well, first of all, I would say go for it. Again, I think there is, for women, I think there's some fear or some hesitation a lot of time because, weights can seem scary. I think there's also this, misunderstanding that somehow it's going to make you bulky or that, I would throw all of that out. I would find someone who can help you, whether that's a friend or a coach. The great thing about living in the year 2025 is there are endless resources. Um, Find someone on the internet, look someone up on Instagram. You can find me if you need to. I'm happy to answer questions. There's plenty of resources. Openpowerlifting.org is the database that I was referencing earlier that has pretty much every powerlifter who competes is in there, so you could find someone locally if you want to connect with somebody to help you. Those would be my do's, and my don'ts would be don't miss out on the chance to pursue something that you might really enjoy.
Sounds like great advice to me. Perfect. Perfect. Tell the folks a little bit about the Devon Group.
Sure. So the Devon Group is a tech PR firm. We have been in business about 30 years. We have clients in various, tech capacities. We are primarily known for our work in the HR tech space. That is, most of our clients tend to be in that area, but we also serve ag tech, fintech, ed tech, all the techs. And we are based out of New Jersey, which is where I live as well. So you mentioned obviously the Eagles before. I live right where Eagles territory starts.
Oh, do
Um,
you? So you're right between the Giants
I I
and
live
the
right where, yep, I live right in Asbury Park, so I'm right where,
I
yes,
have an aunt in Asbury Park, so I know
yep,
exactly what that's. So let me ask you. I got to
yeah,
ask you,
sure.
Giants, Jets, or Eagles?
So my husband is a Giants fan,
Uh-huh.
um, but we obviously rooted for the Eagles this year because, we're gonna go with Philly. So
Okay. Fair enough. That's a
yeah,
wonderfully diplomatic answer. I got to say.
I am in PR.
Yes, you are. I was just going to say, that is like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
PR.
yeah,
That is true PR. That's well, it's not damage control, but it's preemptive. Whatever that is, it's well done. Uh, anyway,
thank you.
Katie, listen, this was a lot of fun learning about all this, and your passion for this is obvious, and it's just great to see and inspiring. And thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Katie Achille. And yes, it sounds like Achilles. We talked about this in the pregame huddle here before we came on, and there's a connection there, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
There you go. So, but no Achilles heel.
No
It's
Achilles heel.
no Achilles heel. Not with this one. So, Katie Achille from the Devon Group and Team USA right here on the Talent Show. I'm Tom Alexander. Thanking you for watching. Thanking you for listening. And we'll see you again soon. So long, everybody.